ideas were clearer. There was a clearer sense at that time of what it meant to be a good Christian disciple and to shape those attributes in those communities. And yet now we have an environment where communities are much more determined by geography and by self-selection, so that two Methodist communities in the same metropolitan area can look very, very different, have different theologies largely at play, different emphases, different types of focus. And so it just doesn't work just kind of line everybody up and come into the denomination and expect that what's served up from a central location is going to meet the needs of these various pastors. And that's something you mentioned in my book. That's actually, I brought a copy of it so you can see it. This book, Thieves in the Temple, Christian Church and Selling the American Soul. That's what I explore, is how all this religious mobility, 44% of Americans have switched religious affiliations at least once in their lifetime. And that's up from 15% back in 1955. So we have a much more fluid environment, and where people are moving around, what are the implications for the way people are formed, for spiritual formation, for character formation? When you can leave, when you're no longer satisfied, you no longer get what you want. Quite vast implications for ministries, and that's what I explore in the book. So this is part of what we've learned about our institutions, is they're set up for a different point in time, and yet some of what came out of these consultations was that yes, clergy are self-directed. They are interested to pursue knowledge at their own pace in many cases, and in some cases they've had they outright rebel when there is a set program established. They come together for their clergy learning experience, and it's this is what you're going to teach, and this is what the seminary professor, the expert on conflict management or on youth ministries or wherever it's going to be. And they say, no, we're not doing that. And they say, no, this is the agenda, this is what we're doing today. And the people gathered on 3 occasions. Bob Reber of Auburn Seminary has said he saw this on at least 3 occasions. Well, they say, no, we're just not going to do it. We've paid our money, we've gathered, we want to pick your brain and go in directions that are more fruitful. And this is, that never used to happen. But that happens now. And so it's really kind of remarkable, this need for dynamism and interactivity, also the need for diversity. Yes, please.
I have 2 questions.
Sure.
So, any idea, is there any research on the percentage of clergy that actually seek out continuing education as opposed to don't do any continuing education at all, and how that compares to the other professions?
The hard numbers, a lot of this is, as I say, is based on the anecdotal stuff that came together in the consultations. I think it varies a lot from denomination to denomination. So the short answer is I don't have hard numbers on that for how many are seeking it out or in what capacity they're doing it. I can say that most.
That was my second question.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Different question, aside from the hardcore numbers, is what motivates what we're calling a new trend as self-directed learning? Is that inadequacy of training? Is that realization that you've been out for a few years, what you learned in theological school is not relevant to what's out in the field? Are things changing so much out in the field and this is so dynamic that people are grasping at straws, or all of the above, or all of the above? So it would also be an interesting question as to what motivates self-directed learning.
Right, and I think the answer to that is that there's a sense that what one gathered in seminary plus what one gets in the pre-packaged continuing education experiences are not adequate, are not meeting the needs. And so they leave pastors with need to pioneer it on my own. I need to find the resources or the experts or the colleagues who can get me up to speed quickly and help me get the skills in my toolbox.
So well, what would be interesting to me about that is the way in which you describe the new environment in terms of protesting what's given. I don't think that that's a new gap, right? That gap you can articulate for at least, I've been doing it 20 years, so at least 20 years. That's the first thing that people say after they graduate seminary, is it wasn't adequate to the practical realities. Whether it was or it wasn't, right, that's the first thing to say. So my interest in what you're saying is the urgency with which it's expressed sounds different.
Mm-hmm.
Not a new gap,
Yep.
but it's interesting about how you're saying that it's presented. So maybe that's something to explore as well, as to why that sounds different with a different set of urgency.
Yes.
So we could speculate about that as well.
Yes, yes. My sense of the urgency on it is that a lot of it comes out of the pastors are they're very busy. They don't have a lot of time or money set aside for education in any given week or even in a given year, and so the combination of having not a great amount of resource to spend on thinking about these things or developing the toolbox, coupled with not knowing what you're going to need a year from now, creates these more urgent situations. That's my sense. How new that is, I don't know, but it seems that's part of it. That there are this sort of guru model of coming and learning at the feet of the expert still has its value on certain subjects. There are, and it seems that in some mechanisms, both the learning with the clergy or learning in seminaries and learning through technology are adaptable and suitable to certain types of subject matter and certain types of learning. For instance, we could say that with the hard skills of balancing books, or the hard skills of sometimes pastors are involved in facility maintenance and in contracting and in human resource issues and legal issues, and some of that can be done with seminary experts or with sort of a technological disbursement of information, technology-based. Here's the information. Now you've got it. Okay, so work with it. That type of thing is suitable still, but there's this. But then there's this the rest of this gap in these areas of with clergy development. There's this whole sort of personal development piece to it, and the spiritual development that needs to happen, and the learning that requires a certain vulnerability of admitting weakness and admitting shortcomings. That one, it doesn't happen especially well online, to be in a chat room and typing in. Who knows where it's going to end up, tomorrow? If you're tight, as you say, nothing ever fully disappears. How much confession are you going to make in an online chat room? Probably not much. That's at least very honest, right? And then likewise in denominationally based experiences, they also report that can be an intimidating environment for that sort of